and their spirit of unity. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I am so moved by that experience that I frankly believe that now is the time to move the bill that is bipartisan, that is a response to the United States Supreme Court, to the floor of the House, to the Judiciary Committee and to the floor of the House. Leader Clyburn was very apt in describing a very significant point that really answers the question of the Supreme Court. If I had my way, coming from the state of Texas, I frankly believe that the reauthorization that we did through the Judiciary Committee, of which I am a member, and which I was very much engaged in 2006 and 2007, was a thorough expose of the value of the Voting Rights Act. We did 15,000 pages of testimony, and witness after witness from different perspectives indicated that the formula that we were using at that time on the pre-clearance was an effective formula. Of course, the Supreme Court challenged the data, and I would only argue that it is appropriate to update the data. I welcome that. But we've gone even further, as been articulated by the bill that has just been introduced by a number of us. We have crafted a formula that says it is an even playing field. An even playing field for a state to opt in because they have voting rights abuses for all people, or to opt out because they have a smooth, even-handed process for citizens in their state to vote. And so I believe it is important that the message get out of what the Voting Rights Act stands for and what it meant for those foot soldiers to cross that bridge. They crossed that bridge, and they were willing and were bloodied, frankly, to do something nonviolent, and that is to petition their leaders at the voting box. I can't imagine that there's any member here in this place, in this august Congress, that would not want to go to their constituents, whether they live in South Dakota, or Utah, or Mississippi, or New York, or Texas, as I do, that there is an unfettered right to vote. I'll soon be introducing a Voting Rights Act that establishes the date that we signed the Voting Rights Act by the president that came from Texas, Lyndon Baines Johnson, with the leaders of Martin Luther King and John Lewis and many others standing at his side, to introduce as that being Voting Rights Act Day, to reinforce the value to Americans of the importance of voting. Who would want to oppose the idea that voting is not important? And so I'm looking forward to having members join on the simple premise that it is important to vote in America, and that it is important to commemorate the signing of the Voting Rights Act and make it Voting Rights Day. That inspiration came as we saw the thousands that were marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Let me just clarify for a moment, under Section 5, the submitting jurisdiction under the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and H.R. 885, Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2015, has to prove that the proposed change are not retrogressive, that they do not have the purpose and will not have the effect of denying or bridging the right to vote on account of race or color. We've expanded that, again, to go by acts, by occurrences that would keep someone from voting. So I believe that this past weekend, on the weekend of Bloody Sunday, was a moving moment that would draw us together, that would allow us to understand H.R. 885. And might I say this, I know that many of us would be willing to have teach-ins to ensure that our colleagues understand the importance of this legislation and that we do it in a bipartisan manner. Let me conclude my remarks by saying earlier today, I stood on the floor and asked for a bipartisan approach to the approval of the Attorney General nominee by the other body. I say that from the spirit of recognition of the three branches of government. A president has nominated a very well-qualified, distinguished member of the bar, Loretta Lynch, to be the next Attorney General of the United States of America. We understand differences of opinion with legislation. I have no quarrel with those differences. I happen to support the human trafficking bill and recognize that there is a disagreement on language, that I agree with the disagreement. But that disagreement can be worked out through ongoing talks and however they want to approach it, or a vote on the floor. But Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General nominee, should not be held up captive to disagreements on legislation and moving toward a constitutional crisis. All of this, Mr. Speaker, is wrapped up together. The Department of Justice enforces the Voting Rights Act, or enforces the voting rights of Americans. As we look to the future, as we formulate the understanding of the three branches of government to avoid a constitutional crisis of not having the leadership that is timely for the work that has to be done, I would hope the Senate would move forward, and I would hope that all of us would honor the Voting Rights Act and the message of Selma, that we stand together under this wonderful flag and stand for voting rights for all. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady from Texas for her remarks. Now it's my honor to introduce the gentlelady from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Congresswoman Gwen Moore.